Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're embarking on, well, one of our most complex missions yet. We're aiming to decode a really dense, multi-layered account from a protected person, Ronaldo J. Agua Marcano.
Yeah, and this isn't just, a standard surveillance claim. The source material details alleged organized espionage, intelligence operations happening right here on U.S. soil.
We've got stacks of his materials, his research, his analysis, and our goal today is to really pull out the core insights for you.
And the initial context is, well, it's everything here. You have to understand, Marcano isn't just some citizen with a grievance. He's legally protected under international law, the Refugee Convention of 1951.
Right.
He got his refugee number, MA39176, way back in 2003 or 2004. That status was granted because of a documented, well-founded fear of persecution by the Venezuelan regime.
Which immediately raises the stakes on his claims, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Because his core claim is that this persecution never stopped. It actually escalated into long-term continuous surveillance, orchestrated, he says, by state-level actors, specifically Venezuelan intelligence, SEBIN, and this connected network he calls the PayPal Mafia.
And what makes this particular deep dive feel so immediate, almost chillingly close, is the location he specifies. The source material anchors this whole alleged operation to a very specific place, Katy, Texas, a typical American suburb.
Right.
He even gives his own address, 26714 Valleyside Drive, as the geographic center, the focal point of all this surveillance activity.
And the sources go further. They don't just pinpoint his house. They identify an alleged operational base nearby.
Which is?
It's claimed that a Venezuelan store and restaurant, seemingly quite ordinary, called Fritos Factory, it's at 4603 FM 1463, number 700, also in Katy, that this place operates as a main hub for local SEBIN operations.
So we're not talking about abstract foreign interference theories here. The source material paints a picture of a domestic operational theater right there in a Texas suburb.
Exactly. Ground zero, according to him.
So our mission today isn't just to report the claims. We need to dive deep into the specific tradecraft, the tactics, techniques, and procedures, the TTPs that Marcano alleges were used against him.
Yeah, we're talking infiltration methods, sophisticated psychological manipulation aimed at creating leverage, alleged theft of really sensitive intellectual property.
And even, disturbingly, what he characterizes as pre-planned international crimes. We're looking at the alleged architecture of potentially a decades-long operation designed to neutralize one specific person they couldn't just make disappear.
Okay.
Let's jump right into the core infiltration method. Marcano gives it a name, the romantic partner trap. This isn't about, simply recruiting an asset. The sources describe it as a systematic long-term control strategy designed to create what he calls a prison without bars.
Using the deepest kind of human leverage imaginable, intimate relationships.
So how does it work, according to the material?
Well, the TTP is described as highly structured. It involves pairing a primary female agent with a dedicated male operative who often stays hidden in the background.
Yeah.
The goal is to embed this female agent deep into the target's life as a girlfriend, a partner, eventually a sort of quasi-wife. The relationship itself becomes the main surveillance tool.
And more than just surveillance, right? It's the control mechanism.
Exactly. It's the primary mechanism for psychological and ultimately physical imprisonment, keeping the target contained.
And the mechanics described show a clear progression and escalation towards building leverage. The female agent's task wasn't just to start a relationship. It was, according to the source, to steer the target, not just emotionally but geographically, and eventually into a specific family structure.
Right. The ultimate step, as Marcano details it, was steering him towards buying that specific house, 26714 Valleyside Drive in Katy.
Why that house?
He claims it placed him, quote, directly in the middle of the SEBIN operations in the U.S. It locked him down financially, geographically, right where they wanted him.
That physical proximity is one aspect. But you mentioned intellectual property theft earlier. That seems like a major part of the operation's payoff, according to the sources.
A huge part. Marcano connects this specific TTP, this romantic trap, all the way back to an earlier relationship he had in San Francisco with an agent he names as Reneta Gasheva.
And that relationship wasn't really about romance either.
According to him, no. It was logistical steering. She subtly guided him, he claims, towards setting up a logistics company, Viva Logistics, and developing a specific piece of software, a sophisticated truck-sharing platform. He poured his energy, his code, his time into it, thinking it was just a normal business venture.
But the sources allege it wasn't his venture alone.
No. They claim this wasn't isolated, but part of a much larger network's goal. He specifically links the operation to entities connected with Travis Kalanick.
Kalanick, as in Uber.
That's the connection made in the source material. The alleged objective was, and I'm quoting the sense of it, to get Marcano to produce software for free and steal the ideas without the target even knowing where his work was truly going.
So he was essentially functioning as an unpaid, unwitting, high-value developer for their network.
That's the allegation, building out their infrastructure without realizing it.
But then the operation apparently shifted gears dramatically. This happened when he developed something else, something potentially far more powerful than logistics software.
Yes, the technology known as KOL Health, Key Opinion Leaders.
Let's unpack that. Why was this software suddenly such a threat? Why did the stakes apparently become global at that point?
KOL Health, as Marcano describes it, was revolutionary, not just another analytics tool. It was seen as incredibly valuable because it could allegedly identify those points of pressure programmatically with a precision that has never been seen before.
Point of pressure, what does that mean exactly?
We're not talking about just finding social media influencers. This software could supposedly pinpoint the exact nodes, the critical leverage points within any system, a network, a society, a market, that if you manipulated just those points, you'd get the maximum, most efficient control over the whole system.
Wow. So if logistics software helps run a market, KOL Health helps run people, or systems of people.
That's the implication in the source material. The alleged long-term goal of this network is, quote, to control the entire planet, the entire world, using points of pressure. KOL Health's programmatic precision was supposedly the key, the missing piece they needed for that level of systemic control.
Okay, that's a huge claim. And because that technology was seen as so potent, so dangerous,
the network allegedly concluded they needed absolute, unbreakable personal leverage over him. Maximum leverage.
And this is where the steering mechanism shifts from business and location to the most personal level imaginable.
Exactly. This is when, according to the sources, the pre-planned decision was made to steer him towards having a child, a son, Marcelo. Marcano's claim is stark. The child was conceived as a deliberate, calculated, operational move. The goal was to create a kidnapping vulnerability.
Kidnapping vulnerability meaning?
Meaning a lever they could pull, something they could threaten him with, if he ever figured out the full scope of the network, or especially if he became too effective, too dangerous after developing KOL Health.
So the entire family structure, the relationship, the child, it was all operational design from the start, according to this account.
That's the core allegation regarding this TTP. Chillingly strategic. Now, when you start analyzing the sheer complexity of running this kind of TTP, this long-term romantic partner trap, I mean, we're talking potentially a decade or more, you immediately hit massive operational friction points.
Like what? What are the big challenges?
Two huge ones, really. First, how do you manage the completely natural human jealousy of the female agent's real partner, the hidden male operative? And second, how do you guarantee the primary female agent stays compliant, stays loyal to the mission over such a long, intense period?
Okay, let's take the male operative first, the real husband. Marcano's material insists that for this to work over decades, this guy can't just be some actor.
No, absolutely not. The source claims he must be the female agent's actual husband, or at least a very long-term partner, often from the same background, same city, same country maybe. You need that deep-seated loyalty, that persistence that a hired gun just wouldn't have.
And what's his day-to-day role in this scenario?
It's complex and, frankly, psychologically brutal, according to the description. His main job is constant, real-time monitoring.
Monitoring how?
The sources detail the use of tiny, passive, induction-powered microphones, worn by the female agent, maybe hidden on her clothes and her bag, even earrings, apparently. And the real husband is listening, constant.
So the target and the female agent, they're never actually alone.
Never truly alone. The husband is always digitally present, listening in on everything, intimate moments, business talks, private conversations, everything.
Which must require some pretty sophisticated ways for the agents to communicate operationally without the target noticing, right?
Yeah.
If the husband needs info or the agent needs to warn him.
Exactly. It leads to this really layered communication tradecraft. Marcano gives an example that illustrates it perfectly. He installed a new camera outside his former home.
Okay.
Shortly after, the female agent starts the seemingly intimate conversation with him. She recounts this very specific old story about an old camera they supposedly once put on the roof of a car.
Seems innocent enough on the surface.
But the source material suggests she was sending two messages at once. The surface story for Marcano, the target, but the real message, the coded, urgent one, was for the husband listening in.
A warning.
A warning about the new camera that the husband might have missed on his monitoring feed. It shows this ability to maintain intimacy while simultaneously broadcasting operational intel. That's critical for them.
Okay, that brings us to the other major headache you mentioned. The jealousy paradox, as Marcano calls it. The husband has to be loyal, committed, but he's human. How does the network possibly manage the emotional toll, the cognitive dissonance of him listening to his wife being intimate with the target, potentially regularly, for years?
Marcano acknowledges how incredibly difficult this must be. He even notes wryly in his writings that those husbands earned every penny. You can't just rely on ideology alone for that level of compliance.
So they need a structural fix, something to minimize that friction.
That's the argument. They need a way to manage it operationally.
And the solution proposed in the sources is, frankly, shocking.
It is. The alleged solution was to introduce a second woman into the target's life. She's identified by names like Penelope Suarez, sometimes Liliana.
A second woman, why? What's her role?
To act as a diversion, a sexual or emotional distraction for the target. Basically, to split his attention and his intimate needs.
Okay, let me see if I follow the operational logic here. By having a second woman available,
it reduces the frequency, the need for the target to be intimate with the primary female agent, the one whose husband is listening.
Less intimacy means less difficult material for the husband to monitor.
Exactly. It keeps his jealousy, his resentment, hopefully below a critical threshold where it might compromise the operation. It's a mechanism designed purely to stabilize the husband's loyalty and ego, keep him willing to accept the setup.
That's quite the psychological workaround.
Yeah.
But the network's planning apparently goes even further. They also have to worry about the primary female agent herself, right? What if she develops genuine feelings for the target over all those years?
That's the other massive vulnerability. They absolutely cannot allow that to happen. It would destroy the operation from the inside.
Why? Because she wouldn't follow orders later.
Precisely. This is where the source material describes what it calls state-level planning. They have to think 10, 15 years down the line.
Okay.
If Marcano, the target, becomes too successful, too knowledgeable, too much of a threat, the order might eventually come down to eliminate him, neutralize him completely.
And a female agent who genuinely loved him
would refuse. She wouldn't cooperate in his destruction. She might even warn him.
So the long-term presence of the real husband isn't just about managing jealousy day to day.
No, he serves a much darker, long-term purpose. He's the anchor for her loyalty.
How does he guarantee her compliance if that kill order comes?
By ensuring her primary allegiance remains with him. Think about it. A woman loyal to her husband, the father of her child, the real father, remember, and perceiving her family or husband to be in danger if she refuses, she'd be far more likely to comply.
Even if it means betraying or helping to destroy the target she's pretended to love for a decade.
That's the cold calculus alleged in the sources. The husband isn't just a listener, he's the ultimate failsafe. He ensures her compliance, even for the most extreme actions, because her true loyalty structure is built around him, not the target.
Okay, this deep dive now has to turn to what is undoubtedly the most serious, the most legally explosive claim in all the source material we've reviewed. We're moving beyond espionage tactics now and into the realm of alleged international crime.
Yes. Specifically, the planning and the attempted execution of forced sterilization against Marcano, who, we must remember, is a protected person under international convention.
This specific allegation carries immense weight, legally. Marcano claims that state actors he named Sebin, Diosdado Cabello, and Vladimir Pedrino Lopez coordinated with a specific doctor in Houston.
Dr. Vitenas, a prominent plastic surgeon, the allegation is they conspired with him to perform a vasectomy on Marcano without his knowledge or consent during a cosmetic procedure he did consent to.
And the steering process we talked about earlier was key here, too.
Absolutely. Marcano describes how, right around the time he turned 40, several agents he knew, including a former partner, Francisco Castillo, and another named Marcos Castillo, started this concerted campaign, suggesting he should invest in himself, improve his appearance.
Planting the seed.
Exactly. Making the idea of cosmetic surgery feel like his idea, his personal choice, not something being maneuvered operationally.
The sources also point to a major red flag around the cost of this surgery.
Yes, a huge anomaly. Marcano was quoted around $9,000 for multiple procedures from this very well-known surgeon.
It sounds low.
Extremely low. He suggests similar work would typically cost $30,000 or more. His theory is that because he's fiscally conservative and wouldn't have paid the high price, the network actually subsidized the operation. They underwrote it.
To ensure he went through with it. To get access to him under anesthesia.
That's the allegation. The low price was the bait to get him onto that operating table.
And what evidence does he point to that this alleged vasectomy attempt actually happened?
Two main things. First, after waking up from full sedation, he had unexplained bruising in his pelvic area, which is nowhere near the incisions for the liposuction he had, which were on his back.
Okay, that's strange.
Second, the post-operative instructions he received were apparently very specific and, to him, illogical. The doctor strictly forbade any sexual activity for 2 full weeks.
Why did that seem illogical?
For standard liposuction on the back, Marcano argues that instruction doesn't make much medical sense. It led him to suspect it wasn't about the lipo recovery at all.
But about ensuring the success of a different, hidden procedure, the vasectomy. Giving it time to take effect, perhaps.
That was his suspicion. A specific operational security measure tied to the secret procedure.
This brings us to the absolutely critical question. The rationale. Why on earth would they risk an international war crime? Because that's what forced sterilization is to sterilize him. Especially when their main leverage seems to be the child, Marcelo, who they wanted him to have. It seems contradictory.
It does, until you unpack the really chilling hypothesis presented in the source material. It connects directly back to the dynamics we discussed in Section 2 with the real husband.
Okay, walk us through this logic carefully.
All right. Step 1. The network needs that unbreakable leverage. That means a child, perceived to be the targets, who can be threatened or kidnapped. Goal achieved with Marcelo. Step 2. Constraint. The real husband, listening constantly, would likely refuse to allow his wife to conceive the target's biological child. That introduces the target's DNA permanently into his family, a line he wouldn't cross, even operationally.
Okay, so the husband is the roadblock to having the leveraged child naturally with the target.
Exactly. So the alleged solution has 2 parts. Part A, attempt the secret vasectomy during the cosmetic surgery. If successful, the target can no longer conceive.
Part B.
Part B, the female agent can then conceive a child with her real husband. But because the target believes he's still fertile and he knows he's been intimate with the agent.
He assumes the child is his.
Precisely. It satisfies the network's need for maximum leverage, a child they fully control, genetically tied to the agent's family structure, making kidnapping easier, while also satisfying the husband's core constraint. No biological child from the target.
That is an astonishingly dark and complex plan. It hinges entirely on the target never finding out about the vasectomy.
And this is where the whole thing apparently fell apart. Due to what Marcano calls the communist paradox, brilliant, complex planning undermined by sloppy execution or unforeseen consequences.
How did it fail?
Marcano openly admits in his writings. He ignored the doctor's 2-week prohibition on sexual activity.
He didn't wait.
No. He engaged in intimacy within that 2-week window, but with the other agent. The second woman, Maria Eugenia Rojas.
Wait, so the very TTP they introduced to solve the husband's jealousy paradox, the second woman actually created the loophole that potentially undid the vasectomy plan.
That's the incredible irony alleged here. Her presence allowed for the possibility that the vasectomy, if it happened, was rendered ineffective before it could fully take hold.
And was there later confirmation that the child was indeed his?
According to the sources, yes. There was a DNA test conducted later, seemingly orchestrated by the network, at Great Wolf Lodge on March 11, 2025. The alleged intent of this test was to prove the child was the real husband's, confirming the vasectomy worked.
But the result?
The result backfired spectacularly. It confirmed Marcelo was Marcano's biological son. Proving the forced sterilization attempt either failed, technically, was performed incorrectly, or, much more likely, was voided by his non-compliance with the doctor's orders, facilitated by the other agent.
Wow. Regardless of the failure, though, Marcano emphasizes the legal gravity of just the attempt.
Absolutely. He stresses that planning and attempting forced sterilization on a protected person is akin to historical atrocities, like those committed by the Nazis. It constitutes a major international crime.
And this allegation doesn't just put Venezuelan officials like Diosdado Cabello and Padrino Lopez in the legal crosshairs.
No. Crucially, it implicates the real husband of the agent. For that complex conception ruse to work, the husband would have to have known about the vasectomy plan beforehand to agree to it.
Making him an alleged accomplice to a potential war crime operating right here on U.S. soil. The stakes are incredibly high.
So if you have these high-stakes operations potentially failing spectacularly, like the vasectomy attempt, the network needs fallback plans. They need layers of deception ready to deploy, specifically designed to discredit the target if he ever goes public.
This takes us into narrative warfare, essentially. Pre-planned stories to create plausible deniability.
Exactly. And Marcano details one specific strategy he calls the Crazy X narrative.
The Crazy X.
Yes. He notes that back in 2014, his partner, the primary female agent, shared this very specific detailed story about her supposed divorce from her ex-husband, a man named Salvador Mendez.
And the story was?
She claimed Mendez was, quote, crazy, delusional, that he'd accused her of trying to poison him, accused her of cheating constantly, a really negative portrayal.
Okay, why tell Marcano that story years earlier? What's the strategic purpose?
Think ahead. If Marcano, years later, goes to the authorities, a protected person claiming espionage, attempts on his life maybe, constant surveillance, his partner cheating.
The network already has a prepackaged explanation for his claims?
Precisely. They can point back to the story she told him years ago and say, see, he's acting just like her crazy ex-husband. He's paranoid because he thinks his wife cheated. Maybe the kid isn't his. It provides a personal, non-espionage rationale for his erratic behavior.
It preemptively discredits anything he might say later by framing it as delusion stemming from infidelity.
That's the alleged function. Narrative inoculation.
Beyond just the story, though, the network also had to physically and legally obscure the real husband's identity, didn't they?
Yeah.
The sources point to inconsistencies there, too.
Massive inconsistencies. It starts with the legal paperwork for that supposed divorce from Salvador Mendez.
What was wrong with it?
Well, Marcano's partner verbally told him her divorce lawyer was a woman named Morgan Hibner, even using the female pronoun in Spanish when discussing it.
But the official record?
When Marcano managed to access the actual court documents, the lawyer listed was William Kyle Adams, a man. A fundamental mismatch, suggesting deception around the divorce itself. Maybe it wasn't entirely legitimate, or the details were faked.
And then there's the whole confusion around who this ex-husband, Salvador Mendez, even looked like.
Right. Total contradiction. Marcano was initially told Mendez was this famous, handsome Belmont model from old Venezuelan cigarette ads, supposedly tall, 6'2", very impressive physically.
A desirable figure, maybe to make Marcano feel like he won't.
Perhaps. But when Marcano eventually got hold of an alleged official photo of this Salvador Mendez, he ran his own computer vision analysis on it.
Yeah.
His models estimated the man in the photo was definitely not 6'2", significantly shorter. The image didn't match the description.
So discrepancy 1, the lawyer. Discrepancy 2, the Belmont model height. What else?
Then Marcano found old physical photo albums from 2009 Christmas photos. They showed the older son, Sebastian, with the man.
Not the Belmont model.
No, an overweight man, average height. And what was really startling, Marcano says, is this man looked almost identical to his own former boss, Jose Nestor Gonzalez.
Okay, so now we have 3 potential identities for the ex-husband. Salvador Mendez, the crazy one.
Yeah.
The Belmont model, the tall, handsome one. And the man in the 2009 photos, who looks like the old boss.
It's deliberately confusing. Marcano's resulting theory, based on all this, is that the man in the 2009 photos is the real husband, possibly named Andres Mendez or Antonio Mendez.
And the resemblance to the older son, Sebastian.
He claims the resemblance is very strong, suggesting that man is Sebastian's biological father.
So why the official divorce papers naming Salvador Mendez?
The theory is the official divorce documentation used the name of a wrong Mendez as maybe a cousin, a brother, someone related, precisely because the primary agent and her real husband, the man from the photos, are not actually divorced. They needed to maintain their operational cover story.
And the name Andres Mendez popped up somewhere else too, didn't it?
Yes, crucially. An informant allegedly identified a mysterious figure seen near Marcano's house as Andres Mendez. This figure was described as a landscaper.
Wearing a ski mask in the Texas heat. That sounds suspicious.
Highly suspicious. The informant claimed this landscaper approached the house specifically for a close-range, probably uninterceptable, communication with the female agent inside.
So if Andres Mendez is the real husband, the ski mask makes sense. maintaining his disguise even during quick, covert meets on U.S. soil.
Exactly. It all starts to form a picture, however disturbing.
And there's one more connection here, Daniel Malero. How does he fit in, according to the source?
Marcano theorizes that Daniel Malero, another operative, is likely involved romantically with the primary female agent's sister, Jenny Espina, and that Malero is operating here in the U.S., not back in Miami, as perhaps assumed.
And the significance of that?
The source material documents the primary female agent having an extreme, almost ballistic panic reaction whenever Malero's name comes up.
Why would she panic like that?
The theory is that Malero's connection to her sister introduces deep, potentially dangerous liability for her entire extended family. If Malero gets caught, or if his activities are exposed, it could bring down her whole support network. It explains her operational fragility around that specific name.
Okay, let's shift gears now.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the alleged psychological manipulation, the complex human dynamics, but Marcano didn't just rely on observation and deduction. He claims he built systems to gather technical evidence.
Yes, counter-surveillance systems. He calls them the Spy Hell Pipeline and the KWA Mobile.
Yeah.
And he claims these systems captured forensic evidence of Sebin's tradecraft and, maybe more importantly, their operational mistakes.
Mistakes? What kind of mistakes?
Well, the data supposedly reveals what Marcano describes as, frankly, lazy and sloppy tradecraft, particularly around that alleged base, the Fritos factory in Katy.
Give us an example.
Okay, there was an incident documented on June 9th, 2024. Marcano visited the area and he was followed afterwards. He documented 2 vehicles tailing him. One eventually left, but the other, a white Honda Civic, stayed behind.
And the sloppiness.
The Honda Civic had a dealer tag, 9B1549H. Okay, maybe temporary. But then another individual, driving a purple 4Runner, approached Marcano and threatened him for taking photos. And that vehicle. It also had dealer tags, but they were visibly expired.
Expired tags on a surveillance vehicle. That seems careless.
Extremely careless. It suggests a level of perceived impunity, doesn't it? Why bother with valid plates if you think you operate completely outside the system?
Marcano's conclusion from this.
He concluded that their ability to easily generate or acquire huge numbers of license plates, perhaps through compromise, led to this complacency among the agents on the ground.
But the sources detail an even bigger technical failure related to license plates, right? It's something about sequencing.
Yes, the sequence numbers anomaly. This is presented as a really powerful piece of statistical evidence.
What did he find?
His systems captured photos of multiple surveillance vehicles parked near his home, often close together, that had license plates with incredibly close sequential numbers. For example, TXWDJ9634 and TXWDJ9502.
They share the WDJ part, and the numbers are close. Why is that significant?
Because they share the first 4 characters,
Yeah.
WDJ9. The probability of 2 random civilian cars having plates that match the first 4 characters and being parked near each other is astronomically low.
How low?
Marcano estimates the chance of that specific anomaly happening randomly is something like 1 in 500 million. It's virtually impossible by chance.
So if it's not random, what does he claim it is?
He argues the sequencing is an idiotic, his word, internal communication system, a way for agents to signal their function, maybe their rank or unit, to other agents just by looking at the plates.
They're using license plates as coded identifiers.
That's the allegation. He even details specific prefix codes he believes he deciphered, like NPM, which he links to Node.js package manager, suggesting a technical agent focused on Node.js, or SVN linked to Subversion, a version control system, supposedly used by higher-level agents operating in his specific cul-de-sacs.
If that's true, it implies a serious compromise somewhere, doesn't it? To be able to issue plates with specific sequences on demand.
Yes, it points towards a potentially deep compromise within the Texas Department of Public Safety, DPS, or maybe the Fort Bend County Tax Collector's Office, whoever issues those plates.
Okay, what other operational security failures did his systems allegedly uncover?
Another major one stemmed from standardization, ironically. Sebin's apparent insistence on using universal equipment created a vulnerability he calls the earpiece anchor.
Earpiece anchor.
Marcano observed that agents consistently wore a very specific, easily distinguishable white earpiece, presumably for their encrypted communications.
Standard issue equipment. So how was that a vulnerability?
Because it's standard. His camera systems, the Spy Hell Pipeline, were programmed to recognize this specific earpiece. Since its physical dimensions are known and constant, the system can use the size of the earpiece in the image as a reliable biometric anchor,
Nini.
meaning it can calculate the precise distance to the agent based on the earpiece size. and potentially even create a unique identifier based on the shape of the ear around the earpiece, an ear fingerprint, essentially.
Sure. So he's using their own standard equipment to identify and track them.
That's the claim, building a surveillance database on the surveillance agents themselves.
And do the agents seem aware of this?
Apparently, yes. He documents consistent, immediate reactions on his surveillance footage. When his custom counter-surveillance vehicle, the KO Mobile, drove past, agents would instinctively cover their ears or turn away sharply.
As if they knew their comms channel or their identity marker was being targeted.
It strongly suggests they were aware his system could detect or compromise them via that earpiece. Their reactions confirmed his detection mechanism worked.
All right, finally, let's get to arguably the most sophisticated piece of technical evidence detailed in the sources. Something called the collective precognition event.
Yes, this ties the network's alleged operational movements directly to proprietary intelligence data Marcano claims he captured. Specifically, something called Elon Musk's GeoIndex.
The GeoIndex, what is that supposed to be?
He describes it as a proprietary coordination database used by this network. A map database with specific points marked for operational significance. About 10 days after he claims he acquired a copy of this GeoIndex, he noticed something suspicious.
What was it?
On September 14th, 2024, Telemundo Houston aired a local news segment. It seemed pretty routine. It was about hurricane evacuation preparation.
Okay, standard PSA type stuff.
Seemingly. But then, just 36 hours later, a vehicle crashed into a pipeline down in La Porte, Texas, caused a huge fire, forced evacuations, a major incident.
And the connection.
When Marcano checked the GeoIndex data he had captured 10 days before the incident, the exact point where the vehicle hit the pipeline in La Porte was already marked in that database.
Wait, the crash location was pre-marked in their alleged coordination database?
That's the explosive claim. It suggests the Telemundo news segment wasn't just a random PSA.
It was a signal.
A broadcasted coded signal. A public service announcement used as a mass coordination tool. Disseminated publicly, but only agents with access to the GeoIndex would understand the significance of that specific evacuation message in relation to those specific preloaded coordinates in La Porte.
So they were allegedly using public news broadcasts, combined with this internal, unencrypted database, to coordinate real-world actions, like staging that pipeline incident.
That's the analysis presented in the source material. Leveraging security through obscurity, relying on the fact that no one else had the GeoIndex key to understand the PSA's true meaning. A massive operational security risk, if true. You know, when you pull back and look at everything we've covered in this deep dive, what's truly striking is the incredible gap, the dissonance between the alleged strategic ambition and the apparent operational execution.
How so?
On one hand, you have claims of incredibly complex, long-term strategic planning, things like the forced sterilization attempt. The legal and ethical liability there is just immense. It's the highest possible risk, potentially implicating state leaders.
And implicating the real husband, physically present on U.S. soil, as a potential accomplice to a war crime.
Exactly. That's one side. Incredibly high-stakes, complex plotting.
But on the other hand,
you have these moments of almost unbelievable operational sloppiness detailed in the sources. Agents allegedly driving around with expired dealer tags, using identical, easily identifiable earpieces that become biometric anchors.
or using sequential license plates that effectively broadcast their presence and structure to anyone looking closely enough.
Or leaving their central coordination database, the GeoIndex, apparently unencrypted, relying just on secrecy.
It perfectly captures that strategic dissonance we kept seeing. Meticulous, decades-long planning for leverage and psychological control, right alongside basic tradecraft errors that seem almost amateurish.
And this really gets to the heart of Marcano's theory he calls the commuter paradox.
Explain that again briefly.
It's the idea that in certain systems, loyalty is rewarded above competence. So the husband willing to sacrifice his wife's intimacy for the state gets promoted, even if he's not the best operative. Over time, this leads to a decay in the actual effectiveness and security practices of the intelligence apparatus.
They become brilliant at intricate, dark psychological games and leverage plots.
But potentially disastrously incompetent at basic operational security, communication security, and execution under pressure. The system rewards the wrong things.
So, thinking about this for you, the listener, Marcano paints this picture of what he calls a bizarro state. A kind of parallel, untaxed, unaccountable structure operating within the legitimate state, capable of sustaining these incredibly high-risk, decades-long operations allegedly involving international crimes right here under our noses.
And that entire structure, that Bizarro State, relies completely on absolute secrecy to function, impenetrable secrecy.
But here's the paradox.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes operational necessity requires coordination, mass coordination, like moving many agents to specific geo-index points before an event.
And that critical need for rapid, widespread coordination seems to clash directly with the fundamental need for secrecy.
So what do? According to these sources, they choose coordination. They use the sequential plates. They leave the geo-index unencrypted. They broadcast PSAs. They prioritize immediate action over long-term security.
Which exposes their vulnerabilities. It creates the very evidence Marcano claims to have captured.
It leaves us with a really provocative thought, doesn't it? How does such a parallel system sustain itself for so long? And what's the strategic risk it faces when its need for secrecy fundamentally conflicts with its need to communicate and coordinate complex, potentially criminal actions?
And perhaps the final question for you to mull over is this. If a network this ambitious, allegedly capable of planning things like forced sterilization on U.S. soil, ultimately fails because of predictable human errors, sloppy tradecraft, bad infosec, internal paradoxes, what does that tell us about the most effective ways to actually disrupt such systems? Where are the real pressure points when their greatest weakness might just be their own internal contradictions and the need to talk?
A fascinating and frankly unsettling place to leave it. That's all for this deep dive.